we set ourselves as what is called the third world to ensure that our part of the world of those who had not oppressed anybody, who did not have any baggage of being colonizers or being oppressors of anybody, had freed themselves to embark on a route to ensure that, first of all, there is first deliverable will be peace, because there could be no peace when there is oppression. And then that peace will be buttressed by democracy and, of course, facilitating development. And we have moved a long way today. If we take the year 2019 alone, it has been a year of what one magazine called the year of mega projects. And the mega project, if you take just under 1 billion people in the country where we're sitting now, going to each one, say I'm putting a vote, one vote, 1 to 900 million, that's a mega project. And it was accomplished efficiently and peacefully and without any foreign aid. But so did Nigeria go through a similar process. That's a very big country in terms of population in Africa. If you've got 200 million people going out to vote and peacefully, and after that there comes just a government, and it's just a normal process, a normal African process. There is no international mediation that this vote was supposed to go there and so forth. And a similar process happened in South Africa and in many other African countries in 2019 alone. So we have reached a point where elections, democratic elections, are a normal way of conducting business. Having done that, of course, we in South Africa are also saying, having voted, what are the major issues that confront us? The major issue that confront us is to complete our own revolution, having attained quite emphatically the political freedom, and freedom having become truly free. We then say, what about the economy? Who owns that economy? And the fundamental of that economy is land. And there will be many ways of dealing with the question of land, because it's so self-evident that land must be distributed equally. We could always have the temptation of grabbing the land equally. But we said, no, let's not take the land equally, let's take it legally. And therefore we go through a process of a constitutional amendment, which will be completed in May next year, where the appropriation of land will have been constitutionalized, so that there is no question that, it was the misuse of a majority and so forth. We go through a constitutional process to repossess and redistribute land. And therefore the major issue now that confront us is that you are going to be having your land back. What are you going to do with it? It's very well to say, that mountain there used to belong to my grandfather and forefather, now it belongs to me. What then do you do with it? And the major push, therefore, that we have, particularly amongst our youth, is to say, let's develop ourselves such that we are able to empower ourselves and therefore reach a state of equality by ownership of the land and the usage of the land in a most productive way. And that means, in the first instance, to empower ourselves with knowledge. We have recently formed what we call the Mandela Gandhi Institute to accelerate the development of youth, particularly in skills training. We are now talking about the fourth industrial revolution. The Mandela Gandhi Institute seeks to inculcate the youth with advanced technology. That's a way to bridge the gap between the past inequalities. When other people walk, South Africa must run, because we've got so much to catch up with. So that the question, therefore, of ownership of the land is going to be fundamental to the question of equality. You can talk whatever legal or theoretical equality, but if it's not based on ownership of the most fundamental means of production, you are not going to go anywhere very fast. So we are therefore looking forward to that process by May next year, where we will have constitutionalized the land redistribution. And in that process, we are looking at the experiences. It's always frustrating to be the last comer, but it's got its own advantage, because you then look at what has our predecessors done with the land, what has India done with the land. And you find some encouraging examples where people are able to use the smallest piece of land as productively as possible. And that means, therefore, you must empower yourself with technology, with knowledge to till the land. It's not the size, it is what you do with that land. And therefore, there's going to be quite a lot of relationship that we develop out of that. And I think this forum is going to assist us in us tabling programs. What is it that is happening, and so that all of us can benefit from our collective wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. This is a very important development which will be taking place. And India, of course, is always there. Now we have arrived at the last, but one of the most important intervention by Her Excellency the High Commissioner, Mrs. Judith Kangangom Kapinj Pangag. It's like my name, it's not easy to pronounce. But Mrs. Judith, the High Commissioner of Zambia, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, High Commissioners, all present in this august house. I wish to adopt most of the views that have been highlighted by my colleagues that have earlier spoken, but nevertheless I add on whatever I feel has been left out, but also buttress certain issues. India and Africa has had good relations generally with all the 54 countries, but over the years relations have differed from country to country, and especially looking at issues where in the past some African countries were colonized by the French, the Portuguese. So in the early stages, we saw India leaning towards countries that were previously colonized by the British, in the case of Zambia. The trade between India and Africa has skyrocketed, but we need to be candid in order to solve certain bottlenecks that silent, but which are real. India has been a great partner and we need to acknowledge and say thank you. But it has a protectionist policy which hinders the African partners to come and settle or establish companies from Africa in India, which is unlike, which is different from countries from the West. Buttressing that issue, I would like to say that in the case of Zambia, 16 million population in Zambia, 10% of that, we have Indians living in Zambia. Most of them are born and bred there. So we see a huge Indian diaspora in Zambia, engaging in manufacturing, transportation, and everything else. Like I want to buttress, we have seen India coming in, collecting raw materials from Africa, even being allocated land in Africa, which is different. Africans can't come in India, get land, put up factories. So I think that is an issue which should be highlighted in the strengthening of relations between India and Africa. Market access by Africans has been rather difficult. And whilst the president at the apex of it is saying go back and harvest and get involved in the development of Africa, that ideology has not trickled down to the implementers at implementation level. So we still remain gogged up with imbalance. And I think that Your Excellencies, that should be highlighted as we talk about India's foreign policy towards African continent in the 21st century. Otherwise, I want to give kudos to India. It has been very upfront in its assistance towards Africa. And I want to say that Zambia has been a benefactor. In terms of education, we've benefited from the scholarships through ICCR and ITEC. And also the location of Zambia in its entirety, surrounded by 8 neighbors. And by God's grace, we share very harmonious relations with all our 8 neighbors. It makes Zambia a very strategic business partner and economically, because we also don't call ourselves landlocked. We call ourselves land-linked because we are able, anybody around us is able to reach Zambia by rail, by air, and by road. And also recalling what my colleague from Rwanda said in terms of inter-African trade, I want to say that to maybe 1%, we try that. We export a lot of cement to Rwanda and Burundi, and we get a lot of materials, African prints, from Rwanda and Burundi. We also have a rail line between Zambia and Tanzania, which has been there over 30 years, and it's still operational. So in terms of the issues of trying to actualize inter-African trade to a percentage, I think we have tried. And we also have 5 priority areas which are beckoning India for investment. That is agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, energy, as well as I want to buttress this infrastructure development. Zambia has 60% of arable land, and only 30% is being utilized. So in that arena, there's room for India to come and invest in agriculture. But also there's a problem. Most of those who have the money to come and invest Either they've not been to Africa at all, and they are scared to invest their money in an arena or an area where they've not been to. So we are saying that each country in Africa is unique. We have very good incentives, and I want to assure the would-be investors that their capital is protected. There's also a great opportunity in the manufacturing, ranging from agro-processing, packaging, manufacturing, solar panels, etc. There is a huge potential in energy, as our country, since time immemorial, has been dependent on hydro-propelled energy. But with the advent of climate change, we've had low rainfall patterns. So we've had a lot of intermittent supply, shortage of electricity. So that is also an arena where investment is highly needed. Doctors, and one, like the other issue I earlier raised, it has been very difficult for African students, African youth, no matter how intelligent they are, to come and take up medical studies, because the All India Medical Fraternity will not allow it. But at the other end of the stick, India is also very dependent on Africa in terms of health tourism. So for us also, at the other end of the stick, we are saying we need to get proficient in the medical field so that we stop this never-ending, capital. Yes, yes. Capital flight is too huge. So if we could break even, let's have a win-win situation. Allow our African children to come and study medicine, then go back home so that we can be self-sufficient. Otherwise, there's an imbalance in the medical tourism. Currently, also, I want to emphasize this. Whilst advertising Africa as the way to go, people should be ready to come in with the private capital, because we'll be bogged down by the Exim Bank loans. We can't afford. We can't afford. So already we are choked. We appreciate, but would appreciate if others would just come in with their private capital, and we can work out ways and means of protecting their monies. Because I know Indians are very careful to put their money, in something they are not sure of. And on a good note, I want to highlight that talking about Zambia, there has been an increase in the trade volumes from $650 million US 2016 to over almost close to $1 billion in 2019. And we foresee a trade volume to increase in the next 2 years. And we've had a lot of Exim-funded projects like the congestion of Lusaka roads, which is the first of that magnitude from India into Africa, according to what Minister of External Affairs, the state minister who I traveled with when we held the CII conclave in Lusaka. And we also have Exim-funded projects where we have health posts in the rural areas. And we also have Itezi in the southern part of Zambia. We have an energy project by Tata, but Exim Bank funded. So we would like to have more projects, but as you can see, we are choked. And because of austerity measures currently, we can't, have any more agreements in that regard. But there's a huge arena and potential for other Indian investors to come through. So, Your Excellencies, I wish to emphasize that I hope that the issues highlighted here in terms of leveraging trade between India and Africa will be forwarded to the powers that be. Otherwise, there's a huge imbalance in terms of trade. You know, because of the protectionist policies, as Africa, we can't come in here, but you are very free. Our doors are wide open for our Indian brothers. I submit and I thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for highlighting those issues, and I can assure you that these will be communicated in the right format to the concerned authorities in India. Of course, businessmen, private businessmen, anywhere in the world, goes to wherever he feels secure and safe. But today things are changing. And Indians have always been businessmen, and that's why we have a very large presence of Indians who are very successful in those countries, and they have grown there and have been the bridges between our countries. And I'm quite sure that that is going to continue. And more, since the given Government of India's focus essentially on creating more trade, more investment, more strategic collaborations in different areas, we will see much greater results. There are always, in a long term and a long lasting relationship, there are always some skewed perspectives, and we need to work on that, certain constraints that we need to address. I want to just some housekeeping issues before we close this session. I want to thank all the ambassadors for sparing their time. Excellency, would you like to say something? I'm so sorry. I mean, my fault, please. May I invite you now, because we were going alphabetically. Your Excellency, High Commissioner of Uganda, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The reason why I did not confirm was I wasn't sure whether I would be here in time for this conference. I even missed the minister's very important day of engagement with ambassadors, because I was on duty in Singapore. You know, this issue about having many places of accreditation. But I was quite happy to have just sat back and listened and gone back. But Nigeria is the one who led on, and this reported on me. So, Mr. Chairman, the reason I came here was because I saw in your brief which you sent out to us, India's foreign policy towards African continent in the 21st century, prospects for cooperation. But there was one word missing there now, which was agriculture. And that is what actually brought me here. Because for me, I am I'm very, very interested in any matter to do with agriculture. That said, let me say that overall, you said India-Africa relations started like 50 years ago or so. For us, ours started in 1890 something when the Indians went to build the Uganda Railway. And throughout that time up to today, we have suffered together, we have lived together, we have loved together, we have cried together. And for us, there is no difference between the African in Uganda who is a citizen and the Indian in Uganda. Now, that said, on the African continent, because I know you don't have time for me, I'll say only 4 things. First, when you talked about agriculture, I said, I'm going to put my point on Africa as a mother about food and nutrition security. Because you cannot have a continent which is persistently crying out for food when we have so much land. But virtually all the ambassadors here have said, we have so much land, but we only use this much. We have so much land, but we only use this much. And the result of that is that when there is a crisis in any part of Africa, I'm sorry to say, Somalia, for example, the women bring the skeletons, carrying them in and saying that they should be fed. Impossible. So the issues of food security, for me, are very, very important for Africa. Therefore, mechanization of agriculture, which includes irrigation, in view of climate change, is very, very important. So it's the issue of not just producing African volumes of food, which are then left to rot. Like somebody said, there are a lot of mangoes in Nigeria, they are not being, so this adding value along the agricultural chains of all African products. Now, this food security thing is also tied up with the issue of investments and trade in Africa. These two, investment and trade, call for increased production and productivity in Africa, and they are the real engines of economic transformation in Africa. Because if you do not have robust investments which will produce excess volumes which are ready for, which can be sent out for export trade, to stimulate African trade, we will continuously continue to import what we need, and the people we will have to export to the rest of the world the small concrete primary products such as coffee, such as tea, such as cassava, which have no value really in the world markets, and that's the perpetuation of the underdevelopment of Africa. So therefore, when we are having this relationship, and we were very honored that your Prime Minister enunciated this 10-point program for Africa in our parliament. When we are having this relationship, it now has to be really deeply serious. We are no longer just thinking of helping Africa. We are thinking of helping ourselves. The Indians who go there, yes, they will be helping Africa, but first and foremost, they'll be driven by the profit motive. They will want to make their money. And they are not going to sink their money in Africa because of the love of Africa, no. But at the same time, they will bring, when they come there, they will bring us opportunities for jobs, they will bring us new technologies, they will bring us new ways of doing things, and this way we all grow. Lastly, one more point, tourism. This is to make sure that we get rid of the stereotypes. I was in this vibrant Gujarat summit, and this was January this year, I think, and they were still talking about Idi Amin. When we said Uganda, and they were still talking about Idi Amin. My minister was so furious. He said, you people, you've left the Chinese to come and court the girl. They have now married the girl, and now you are crying Idi Amin. Idi Amin died a long time ago. We have moved on since then, and you have left the ground empty for any man to come there and court Uganda and take her away. So please, this tourism, I think, will help us with this issue. So the more people travel and see Africa in its real way. And I have traveled. Africa is such a beautiful continent, you don't know. Lastly, Madam Zambia said it. I think the Nigerian ambassador said it. My brother from Rwanda said it. You have to start thinking outside the box of Exim Bank if you are going to get us development capital for Africa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those words, Excellency, and I'm sure that all these are going to be extremely useful imperatives for our march forward. We'll just have, although it's a little late for the tea, but I think we're going to take a 15 minutes tea break. After that, we have two very, very important and strategic sessions, and we will request you all to please come back after your tea. And listen to the real experts who are going to tell us about these strategic issues. Whatever you have said is extremely important for us. And we'll request the ambassadors to go outside as a ritual. We'll have to take a picture when under the blessed. Let's do that there. We request the ambassadors. And then there is a little sound bites that our videographer is taking for each country. So kindly give 2 minutes, and then we'll be back by 15-20 minutes latest. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, please.